I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
This is where the fun begins.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a special bonus episode of Jedi Knights, the official Star Wars podcast for JoyClicks. This is the first episode we're recording in 2021, but the second episode you'll see. I'm your host, Christian Buckley, joined as always by Mike Connors.
Yes, usually the only co-host here, but we got another co-host as well. If she'd like to introduce herself.
Yes, very special
Hello.
guest.
Hi, I'm Kayla. It's great to be on. I watch this podcast a lot, and it's really great to be on it and get to talk about Star Wars because it's something I really love too.
Yeah, so we are doing a special episode dedicated to Season 2 of The Mandalorian. We will lead off with general impressions, a month later. But specifically, why Kayla's here is because she was talking to me as the season was going on of Mando Season 2, bringing up some interesting points about the Mandalorian Dinjarin as a protagonist, specifically the way he's portrayed as a parental figure, parental figure, and how he crosses some lines of breaking down typical the stoic father and really interesting character things. So we're gonna get to all of that. But before we dive in, Kayla, I think it's only fair, since you are a Star Wars fan, and there's nothing more harsh than the judgment of Star Wars fans against other Star Wars fans. For the listeners, what is your favorite Star Wars movie, and who's your favorite Star Wars character?
My favorite Star Wars movie is Revenge of the Sith, and if it's no surprise, Anakin is my favorite Star Wars character.
Okay.
I feel like some people would say Revenge of the Sith is a bold choice, but that's a good film.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched it 4 times in the past 3 weeks, I think.
So,
any reasoning to Anakin being your favorite, I guess?
I just made a TikTok about this. I would say it. Go check out my TikTok, but he is
plug the TikTok, yeah.
Yeah, go check it out. I can't say it on air. Okay, he's such a tragic, beautifully tragic character. The poetry is beautiful. His love affair with Obi-Wan it hurts my soul. He's just he's witty and he's quirky and funny and he's such a badass. And then his just tragic fall, I just love him.
Mm-hmm. I feel that with the redemption and everything, it's good stuff.
And potential important detail, you're talking specifically about Hayden Anakin. You like him more than Clone Wars Anakin, right?
Yes, but just because he's beautiful. He's so pretty. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people get mad about him delivering the character, but he's perfect. He's just the right amount of whiny and beautiful all into one.
All right.
He is beautiful.
Yes,
I have to say.
I can't wait to see his beautiful face scarred in the Vader suit in Kenobi. But why don't we talk a little bit about Season 2 of The Mandalorian? If you are following along with the show in the back half of 2020, Mike and I were doing weekly recaps of The Mandalorian Season 2, similar to how we did Season 1. Over the break, the episode that's already out this week is probably going to go a little more in-depth on the wider reaches of our Star Wars experience over the break. But I did watch The Mandalorian Gallery, Mike. I watched it with Kayla. I don't think you have yet.
I have not watched that yet. We were talking a bit before the podcast about it, but yeah, what did you like it?
It was good. They didn't touch on Luke at all, which was a little disappointing. But Kayla, from a technical perspective, I don't know. I didn't watch all of Season 1 of the Gallery because last year for Season 1 of Mando, they did episode by episode recaps.
Mm-hmm.
As a documentary, sort of, what were your highlights in terms of the technical stuff? Was it really just seeing the set and seeing how they expanded the scope and talking to the directors?
Yeah, I felt like it was just a good glimpse into behind the scenes and hearing from each actor or actress. I thought it was really nice. I didn't think it was this really well set up documentary, but I think it served its purpose of here's behind the scenes and this is what we did. And I thought it was super cool to see the different directors and stuff.
Yeah.
My question is, did they do any of like the table conversations like they did in the first season?
No. It was mostly just like talking heads. It was interesting though because the format of the documentary, it went from like director to director, so each episode kind of got like 10 minutes almost.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I would say, and it was really cool. You know, like Bryce Dallas Howard was there as a returning director, and so was Rick Famuyiwa. Them talking about their episodes, which were a couple of my favorites, was pretty interesting. And
Yeah.
you know, we just saw more of the 360 set, so it was solid. Not no crazy revelations like we got with Filoni talking about Qui-Gon the first season, but
You said that they didn't bring up Luke, and we were kind of discussing this beforehand. Why do you think they didn't do that? And the second point I want to make is I feel like the first season, 8 episodes, that was way too much.
mm-hmm.
But maybe this sounds like it was too, like, not enough content. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting, but it did feel like a compilation of like some 10-minute featurettes. So there wasn't much substance to get out of it. Like, Kayla, did you think there was anything more than that?
No, I think it was pretty much that. And I think like we were saying earlier, like they didn't show Luke because of spoilers and trying to keep it under wraps. And maybe I think we were talking about, I don't know when they completed the documentary, so I don't know if they completed it before the last episode or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
True.
So, other than that, though, season 2 of The Mandalorian has ended. In hindsight, how are we feeling, Mike? Have your thoughts changed? Do you have a standout episode? Do you remember all the episodes? Like, what's your read looking back at Mando season 2?
Looking back on it, I'd have to say that I was more impressed with it than I was season one. I think there was like a lot more high parts of season two. I think the show's fine, or season one rather. I think the show's finally coming into its own in many ways that we'll talk about later on in this episode. Like both just in terms of like the characters and the overall lore, but like also thematically. And then also just like thinking about the episodes in season two, probably my least favorite would be the second one where they like do the whole frog lady thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just seems sort of like out there, but I understand it. Like, season one had a lot of those episodes as well. I feel like Kayla, maybe you don't agree or maybe you disagree. I don't know.
I just have a deep fear of the frog lady. I'm sorry. She troubles me.
Very scary.
It was very interesting though, because in that documentary they showed a bunch of like the sets and stuff and like shooting on location, and they showed the nude frog lady like in like as she was in the bathing scene, and like
Oh my god.
yeah, and like the actress who was playing the frog lady, like you could see her face between the mouth, and they just edit that out. It was really really surreal.
That is so strange.
Yeah, but I did realize also, whoever was like on set in the costume also was on set for Kuiil in season 1, and it was just Nick Nolte did the VO after the fact.
Oh, it was the same actor or whatever.
Yeah, it was the same woman on set, and it was cool because talking about like ADR and the celebrity guests, John Leguizamo, who is the mob boss in episode 1, they showed him and him and Pedro in the booth, like doing their back and forth, which was neat. But yeah, Kayla, for you with season 2 compared to season 1,
Yes.
do you think it was better, stronger? Like, what aspects of season 2 stick out in your mind as opposed to season 1, or just as a whole?
Because yeah, I thought it was way stronger because I like how in season 1 it was a lot of side quests that didn't really have a lot to do with anything. And season 2 followed this more like straight arc while having some of the side quests, which I like. And I was finishing Clone Wars at the time that the Ahsoka episode happened, so it was like such a great connection into that, and I was like freaking out. So season 2 was better than season 1 for me.
Yeah, I'm with both of you. I think season 2 is a stronger season. I still like the vibe of season 1 a lot, I think a lot of that is retained with season 2. It's just a difference of we're still doing side quests mostly, but the scale of the side quests are blown up.
Yeah.
And I think from the first episode, that's very clear. Like the crate dragon that was shot in IMAX, like very clearly strong first impression. It's like, oh, hey, okay, we're doing some big time stuff this season. And even the stuff that does feel a little lower budge, and I don't even think it's low budge. I've just seen the complaint thrown around a lot, but like the Boba Fett fight, when he like fights all the stormtroopers, people are like, it looks like a fan film. I still think that thematically that's a big moment that's still bigger than most of the set pieces from season 1.
I don't think any of the moments in this season sort of felt like low budget. I feel like a lot of them were pretty solid all the way through. If anything, I thought that season 1 maybe was like sort of skimping in those areas more. But
Sure, yeah.
I mean, that's just me.
Looking back, do we have favorite episodes?
Yeah, the Ahsoka episode for sure. It was so cool to see her in live action. I think she did great. I know there are a lot of opinions about the Ahsoka episode, but I thought it was great and really powerful to finally see like her not as animation.
Yeah. Mike, I know you were pretty hot on that episode too, right?
Yeah, that episode's definitely up there. I'm not sure like what exactly was my favorite. I'd probably have to just like really think about that. But the one that comes to mind is probably the one with Bill Burr. I just thought that he did a really great job in that role, and I like sort of just like the back and forth between him and Mando, though there is really just like a one-way back and forth. Though I thought it was interesting, and the way that episode ends is pretty badass. So
yeah, do the seismic charge.
Yeah.
It was interesting though, because you bring that up. The main standout for me in that episode, I think, is how it's written, because I think a lot of the Mandalorian, the writing isn't like the thing that is the highlight of the show. You know, it's fine, but I think that episode was such a standout because that final scene with like the officer and Bill Burr, and like it dances around that like, hey, there's some gray stuff in Star Wars the way something like The Last Jedi does, or something like Rogue One to an extent, where it's like, hey, the rebellion isn't perfect. You know, like there is that questioning of like the both side heroes on both sides, the crawl, but like, yeah, I'm with both you. Both those episodes were awesome. Clearly, like obviously the finale was really great too. And I think there was one other one I liked a lot.
Do you have a favorite? Yeah, like one that's maybe different than the one that we picked.
I mean, I liked the episode with Bo introducing her. Because I think that was the Bryce Dallas Howard episode.
Yeah.
Because it was like an abridged version, but it was like, no. It's similar to the heist episode in season 1, but without the fat, which I appreciated.
No, yeah, that's true. I'm trying to remember. That one was like, that was on the water planet, right?
Yeah, It was there. We dropped off Frog Lady, she babysat Grogu, and then we did the pirate heist.
Right.
So that was pretty cool. So yeah, I think now would be a good time to bring up the big central focus of season 2, which is Dinjarin warming up to this kid, this child, which is introduced in an interesting way because season 1 leaves off with him clearly like he's risking it all for the kid, but it's mainly for the code. But this season we see him question the code a lot. We see many other characters like Grief Karga. I think that was episode 2. That's a good one. The Carl Weathers episode.
True.
Like when he's introduced and it's like everybody is just celebrating being back, it feels like in the first few episodes. And when we go back to Navarro, he's just hyped up about this kid and he's like, oh, the kid, he's okay. Like it's a lot more openness about caring for this kid. And Kayla, do you want to like tee up what your whole read was, and then we can just dive into some of the points you have?
Yeah. I mean, Mando starting to care for this kid really made me think about like this father-son theme that we have going on in Star Wars. I mean, like literally the I am your father is like the most iconic quote probably from Star Wars, and it's what people know, and it's like there is a reason why that's such an important quote. And I think that this season and Mandalorian's actions like really help redefine this quote. into something brand new that we haven't seen before in Star Wars. So, you know, we can like take, I guess this is where I wanted to like see what you guys thought. Like, you could take Vader and Luke, you could take Obi-Wan and Anakin, Han and Kylo Ren, and then you have, you know, like Din and Grogu, and like, how are all those fatherly figures different from each other? Like, first of all, is like, I thought a great point to start on about Mando.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'm thinking about here when we talk about like Luke and Vader, or like Anakin and Obi-Wan, or Kylo Ren and his dad, Han Solo, is there's like this sort of like this need for the like, you know, the person like Luke and Vader's relationship. Like Luke is sort of like searching for like that father, I guess, and like Anakin sees like a father figure in Obi-Wan, and Kylo Ren like had daddy issues, we all know that. But like with Grogu and Mando, it seems like it's kind of flipped. Like Grogu doesn't necessarily maybe need Mando, but like as Mando and Grogu sort of connect together, it seems as though Mando needs Grogu more than like any of these other pairings, in that way, I guess.
I think also I'll add on to that because I agree, Mike, with what you're saying. What I find interesting about it is that like the typical like if you look at Anakin, Obi-Wan, if you look at Luke and Vader, antagonistic, right? Like there's a lot of friction, you know, even Anakin and Obi-Wan, who even in Clone Wars are very close, they butt heads a lot. Kylo killed his dad, so clearly some friction and tension, and like there's a lot of that relationship, you know. Like I think with Kylo Ren and Han, we eventually got to a point, and Luke and Vader also, we got to a point where like there's resolution there and like this healing. But it took what 3 movies for both of those relationships to change like that. And I think they kind of end with finality. With Mandalorian, it's interesting because season 1, it was sort of Mando fitting into that stoic dad. I'm not going to show any care for you because I don't want to get attached. Like, this is my job. I'm treating it like a job. But season 2 could be his like Return of the Jedi, where Luke and Vader are on the bridge talking like, it's too late for me, son. Like the more in tune emotionally type thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think looking at this, the thing I noticed is that like all previous fatherly figures were so unavailable to their children and like refused to be vulnerable. And that has just created such a bad habit in Star Wars of creating these like dysfunctional fathers, and then their sons have daddy issues and all have a dark side in them. And I really think that like Din navigating fatherhood and like his masculinity and how to take care of Grogu in season 2 like really breaks that barrier down.
Totally. I think that's, you know, we see like Din sort of like reject Grogu in the beginning of season 1 as well. But like, you know, through the experiences that he has with him, it's cool to see that progression over time where like, you know, he definitely like flips that on its head, and Grogu becomes like the center of like everything he's doing. So I see the point here, and it's really interesting because it definitely does flip everything that like Star Wars already had about these themes like on its head for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like that also goes along with like what society and like even like Din's like how he was brought up and like his experience of masculinity and how he was brought up at the Death Watch and like what he was supposed to be, and what all these like fatherly figures like are supposed to be and what Vader's supposed to be, and he grew up in like very strict and masculine environment, and now that he's like having to take care of Grogu, he's like kind of lost on how to be a caretaker.
I mean, I think that's an interesting point too, and you just made me think of this, and I don't know if this is something you're planning on getting to, but specifically if we tie it back to season 1 with just the foundling group that he was rolling with. I don't remember if they were all foundlings, they were all Mandalorian, but it seemed like, at least this was the vibe I got from that group that was operating on Navarro, like in secret. It seemed like the armor was sort of the matriarch in a way. Like she was the one that was in charge of giving commands to everyone, and she's the one that gave him the quest. So like, do you think that has anything to do with like this continual realization of him stepping into a father position or a parental position? Because at the end of season 1, she I forget what it is. She's like, you're a group of 2 now, like you're a clan of 2. So like, do you think he'd be stepping into the role the armor was in for their group, and like she was not really, she was providing for them, but in a way that was like, hey, I can like craft you stuff, you know, like it's still like a caretaker position.
Yeah, I think he was definitely stepping into that role, but I think as that role, what he experienced, like he was so closed off because that's how he needed to survive.
Sure.
But now in this new role with Grogu, he's kind of like redefining his own life. So I don't know that she would be like a good role model or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because we know that season 2 sort of established the fact that Dinjarin is part of like this religious culty sort of sect of the Mandalorians, and it does seem as though like the armorer was sort of like the matriarch of that underground clan. It makes me wonder like what sort of like different like power structures that like these different clans of Mandalorians have after whatever happened on Mandalore, since they're not there anymore.
Right.
One thing I was thinking of though is we know also that like Dinjarin is basically like an orphan, and I guess I was wondering what sort of impact do you think that has in his sort of his character wanting to take care of Grogu and take him in, sort of as he was taken in by the Mandalorians.
Yeah, I don't know that he has been shown affection ever. So now he has this thing that like he has been showing affection towards, but he maybe like definitely at the beginning of season 2 he doesn't realize it, or he doesn't want to let himself realize it because he's never been shown that. So yeah, that's pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, and the entire existence of the Mandalorians, I think, in every single piece of Star Wars media we've seen, like even in the Clone Wars, where the Clone Wars and like Satine's trying to get away from the image of the Mandalorians and how the universe sees them as like barbarians, you know, like ever since they fought with the Jedi in the Old Republic. Like it's that image of the Mandalorians, and the way of the Mandalore is like a barbaric warrior tribe that also has a civilization, right? Like it's that first, and the way people look at Mando when he walks into a bar, it's like, oh, okay, they clearly fear him. So I'm wondering if that too is also sort of the way they tell their story about Din and his growth. I wonder if like Favreau and Filoni, when they wrote this season, they were like leaning into that as sort of the analog for the norms of masculinity that you're talking about.
Yeah, that as a masculine male, everyone should be scared of you type thing.
Sure, and just like using the guise of like the Mandalorians are supposed to be these barbaric people, and that's what people see, you know, like that's how he literally covers himself in that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that's why he is so reluctant to show affection towards Grogu or any type of care or like acknowledge that care. And this actually leads into another point I wanted to bring up is I think the episode with Ahsoka is a real turning point for him, where she makes him realize that like, oh, I do care about this little child that I've been carrying around, and his brain kind of explodes a little bit. And I think a really great indicator is that is how he always calls. He never, even after learning Grogu's name, he never wanted to call him that at first. He was always like, oh, like, hey kid, or the child, but he never knew his name. And then when Ahsoka's like, his name is Grogu, he was like, okay, kid. So I think that's a really interesting point. I guess like the power of naming someone or something, and how it can, like, by calling him Grogu, it can indicate his affection for him and maybe why he didn't want to do that at first.
It's interesting too. I think the showrunners make a point to show that like Grogu, whenever someone says his name, that he like responds to that in a different way. And so like you see that like when Mando calls him Grogu, I think it's like when they're in the Razor Crest in some episode, like Grogu responds in a different way visually for like as a viewer, like you see the difference between those two ways that he treats Grogu, and so yeah, it's interesting to see him sort of like progress over time to sort of become attached to him.
Yeah, and Mike, I think the scene you're talking about is the episode immediately after the Ahsoka one.
Is it? Okay.
I think it's like the cold open because he's just flying in the cockpit. He looks down at me. It says Grogu, and he like looks up at him, and they like, I think he just like shoos him off, and then does it again, and then he laughs, and like that's the first time we ever heard him laugh. You know, or like show any emotion that's not trying to be threatening, which I thought was cute, but I can make a comparison too. I don't know if either of you have experience with this, but I don't know if this is tropey or not. But the newer God of War game from 2018, Kratos, hyper masculine guy, like screams at everything, kills everything he sees. There's literally a sex mini game in the old games. Like it's very, very dripping in that stuff. And like 2018 makes him a dad, and the entire game he calls his son boy. And it became a meme, but like there's a certain point where he like has a really tender moment when he calls him son or Atreus, and it's that it reminded me of that, you know, like just the relying on the name to really show like a vulnerability, and I'm sure you'll get to this too, but like the armor as well, like.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like a huge sign of like showing vulnerability and like a connection and ownership with somebody, and just the fact that Mando isn't comfortable with saying Grogu because he's uncomfortable with the fact that he does care about like this kid, and uncomfortable about tapping into this like traditionally feminine trait inside of him, because he was raised in such a masculine environment that tapping into his more feminine side is like really scary for him at first.
It makes me wonder what the showrunners are going to do with this going forward, because you know, like not to spoilers for season 2, but like right at the end, he gives Grogu up to Luke, and we've seen over the past 2 seasons how what a connection that they've grown together, and how much Mando loves Grogu. I think when we're talking about Dinjarin having to deal with his own masculinity and stuff, it'll be really interesting to see like where this takes him going forward, like how he's going to deal with that like loss of someone that he loves, obviously, and yeah, I think that a large part of it is him going to have to deal with like his preconceptions of like what a Mandalorian is and like what he's supposed to be in this big world, because he's gone from like being this like badass bounty hunter who like doesn't care to somebody who's like extremely attached to his son, and so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see like how he deals with that going forward. He didn't look good the last few frames. He looked real sad.
Yeah.
So
yeah, season 3 is empty nest syndrome, him dealing with that,
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean,
like
that would be perfect. Yeah.
Because yeah, Mike, I'm wondering, and I think Caleb pointed this out too, like what direction do they go with it? Like, is it him using that feeling to like redefine who he is, or does he double down and be like, all right, gotta kill a bunch of people, gotta be the badass bounty hunter again, gotta like wall myself off, become the king of Mandalore? Like, I don't know what direction they'll go in.
It almost would be more interesting, right? If he did that, bit like walling himself off and just like building himself up and like doubling down on what he was before. Kayla, do you want to say something on that?
Oh that was just a super great point I hadn't even thought of, because at the end, I actually wrote down that him giving Grogu off to Luke is like the strongest and like most intense way to show that you care about someone, is like letting them go and like seek their full potential or safety or whatever. And then he cried over him, and that is definitely breaking down some masculine walls and showing his feminine side, because I guess that's a traditionally feminine trait, which it shouldn't be. So I'm glad this man is showing emotions. But yeah, I think that's such a great point, because we finally did see him cry and like completely break down. So now he's heartbroken, and how is a man who has done this whole arc going to come back from being so heartbroken?
Wondering if you guys think he's going to find Grogu again, just purely plot wise.
I'd assume like
I think
he tells him,
Will.
yeah, when he gives him to Luke, he's like, I'll come back for you, you know. I think it's just like, hey, you gotta do your training first. Like this is something you need, you know.
Totally. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
I think.
I'm interested. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to agree with Christian and say that. Yeah, I definitely
yeah.
think that he's going to have to.
Yeah. Would you?
I was gonna agree as well.
Do you guys think that would be better off saved as like a conclusion of season 3 thing, and then we just deal with the emptiness for a lot in season 3? Because I think we're on the same page where after Favreau was like the heart of the show is Mandalorian and the child. I think taking one aspect out of it for at least maybe half a season or like 3/4 of a season would do very well to help build up Din's character more, because I think out the gate in season 1, just seeing him have this caretaker relationship, even if it was just sort of like surface level, I think immediately made him one of my favorite Star Wars characters and infinitely cooler than Boba Fett ever was. Like, so
For a while.
So I'm wondering if like that absence would be better served for like a couple episodes or a whole season. Like, what would you two prefer to see, I guess?
It's interesting. I think maybe a whole season, maybe just to see, because like he is this father figure now. He's a father figure and a mother figure. Like he's navigating both of those, and you know, I think it would be really interesting to see how he deals with like the empty nest syndrome, because I think Star Wars is making commentary on how like there are more like stay-at-home dads now, and there are more mothers who are going to work, and like the dads who have to, like dads face emotion too, and they face empty nest syndrome too, in addition to mothers. So I think commenting further on that and having that emptiness would be really cool to see him navigate and find out even more about like his more feminine side.
Sure.
I think like us as viewers, we're also put in Mando's shoes in a way. You know, like you said previously, Christian, you know, Favreau has said in the past that like Grogu is the center of the show. He's like the emotional core, it seems. And, you know, like taking that away, not only does that affect like, you know, Dinjarin within the Star Wars universe, but us as viewers too, like we're going to be going through that with him.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so I don't know how long that should be. It should be for, in my opinion, I feel like it should be for at least a few episodes, maybe even an entire season. Like, you know, having the viewer go through that with Dinjarin, I think would be more impactful. But
yeah, and I think off the track record of the show so far and the way they handle fan servicey things with legacy content, I feel like by season 3 you can have some fan service moments within your own show. And I feel like it writes itself for the finale to be like the triumphant return of Grogu, you know, like with his mini little lightsaber. Maybe he can like say a few words now, you know, like that feels like it would be earned so well. But I just see waves and waves of reactionary Star Wars fans that are like, the show sucks now. I don't like it. It's sad, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I guess I'm wondering, do you think that, you know, Grogu and Mando will ever be united in the same way that they were before? Like, you know, father and son in that same way?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, is he gonna resent him? Is it like when he's like, you don't understand, Dad? Like, is he gonna get to that point? Like, I don't know.
I would hope not. From everything they set up, I would hope that we continue to get a healthy father-son relationship, because there is an absence of that in Star Wars. So I hope they continue that.
Here's another point that I think might be interesting if we do get a reunite moment at some point. Kayla, do you think the way, because look at like Grogu in the scenario, right? His single parent is Din. Now he's being handed off to Luke Skywalker. Do we get like a two sides of like getting like sort of a stitched together parent scenario there, where it's like he has two figures to look up to?
Stepdad.
Exactly, yeah. Like he has two dads, you know, at that point, because he's still an adolescent child, even though he's 50, but he's he's being handed off to Luke to guide him through life, and he's still like very impressionable, right, because of development. So I'm wondering what happens at that point. And I know a lot of the points you're making about Din, I think Luke, in my opinion, he's never always been the typical like action hero man guy, you know. Like I do think Luke does have a lot of that vulnerability, and George Lucas, I think, in his writing of most of his protagonists, while there are like the tropes of like daddy issues, I feel like Anakin and Luke specifically do have some of those feminine written qualities to them that I think could be interesting and continue Grogu's development.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was how Ahsoka said that he had been trained at the Jedi Temple before, so I don't know if he would just see Luke as like another mentor and like miss Din, or if he would form an attachment. Well, I don't know. Can they form an attachment?
Well,
I guess they're not supposed to, right?
If Grogu is being trained to be a Jedi, maybe he doesn't form an attachment and he comes back to Din and Din's like, no.
Well, if you think of it that way too, like Luke, after 6, we still don't really know the intricacies of his like mentorship, you know? Like we don't know all the things he's ditching. We know that in 8 he's like the sacred texts, but like does he practice all those things, you know, in his first couple years? Like is he, because I'd say he has an attachment to Leia and Han and his dad by the end of 6, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm really curious to see if they dig into that at all.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about like how this is going to affect Grogu, since we know that like attachment is not a great thing for a Jedi. Cough, cough, Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I guess like we're talking about this from Din's perspective, and it's definitely going to be hard for him. But like, I don't know. Do you think the show's going to follow like how Grogu also deals with this? Because he is learning to be a Jedi and everything.
That would be so cool. Like
Yeah.
parallel stories going on. That would be really cool.
I wonder too, and I don't know if this is straying too far, but I do wonder too, because for how few of Grogu's species there are in Star Wars, I'm wondering how long-term the Grogu game is, you know? Because Yoda has been in all 3 trilogies. He was 900 when he died, and we're just getting the High Republic right now, which is new content. Yoda's in there, and he's like 500. So like, are we laying the seeds with Grogu right now, and we're seeing the impressionable Grogu and like the parents that he's having, and then are we gonna get the new trilogy? It takes place like 800 years in the future, and Grogu's the new Sith Lord because he formed an attachment with Din. Like I don't like, how long term are we thinking right now?
I want to see Darth Grogu, man. That's really what I want to see.
Great.
But we can bring it back to the discussion.
We've strayed far off the path. Well, I mean, something that we haven't talked about yet that I think is very, very important, is that Mandalorian took off his helmet for Grogu. Like, he did that for him, and he that was like his highest thing. He was like, I'm never taking off my helmet. Like, I can't do that. But he did that like just to save Grogu, and I think that was so sweet and very fatherly. That was like probably one of the biggest moments besides him crying, where I was like, oh my god, like he is a father. Go dad.
Well, we've seen like throughout season 2, like sprinkles of like, you know, Din starting to get like disillusioned by like the sort of like culty like Mandalorian sect that he was grown up in, and he starts to like sort of like stray away from that, and that's like the whole thing is like he doesn't take off his helmet. That's like the culmination of all of that, which is really interesting. Sort of seeing him sort of break away from what he knew, the only thing he knew.
Yeah, and I wonder too if, I mean, I feel like part of that build up as well is just him being paired with so many other Mandalorians this season, because we have Boba Fett, who is now officially canonized, is a Mandalorian, and Din is able to see his perspective on it. And I think with Boba Fett, he fills a lot of those standard barbaric Mandalorian characteristics, you know, and Din sees that. He's like, oh, he's like the standard in every way except he's taking the helmet off. And then Bo-Katan, who's going to be the leader, the heiress or whatever to Mandalore, the capital of his religion, is like maskless 90% of the time. So I wonder if those were like also ways to build in of like keeping him doubting, you know, but
Probably. I mean, I don't see that any other reason for bringing in Bo-Katan and like Sasha Banks' character, I forget her name, the other guy. Like, yeah, I don't see the reason of bringing them in other than to just like challenge those preconceptions that Mando already had. Yeah, since he was like living underground and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, super cool. And I think another thing that really struck me as him caring for Grogu is when he like threatened Moff Gideon. What did he say? He's like, he means more to me than you will ever know. And I was like, whoo, okay. So I really loved that. And that was like really emotional because that was kind of at the end of like this whole arc where he's threatening this man for his kid.
Yeah, that was a good moment.
For sure.
Great moment.
So I guess, like, how much of this do you think rests on Din specifically building his character to wherever we're going in season 3 versus him sort of being this wanderer that we saw in season 1 that might just be a bit more impressionable now? Because I know a lot of the points we brought up so far is like Ahsoka is the one that really gets him to open up a little more. What we were just talking about with like Bo and Boba Fett sort of pushing him along those lines. Mayfeld sort of like aggressively shoving him into doing some things that are like all pushing him towards this conclusion of where he ends up in the finale. Like, do we think, like, what's your read on that, Kayla?
Like basically the end of his arc?
Yeah, like the fact that it was reliant on a bunch of other characters to get him to there versus like introspective.
I mean, yeah, I think like it all stems from him not being comfortable with taking on these like more feminine traits. And then realizing he does have he like loves Grogu, and it takes Ahsoka to tell him that like, you know, like just be vulnerable and like just stop fighting it. Like he has an attachment to you. You have an attachment to him. Like it's dangerous, but like you have to face that. So I think just like he, you know, like I think he is, I call him Dadalorian. I think he has like great parenting skills at the end of all of this, and like he's finally willing to take on this like traditionally feminine role and responsibilities, and like I mean just from season 2, like preventing Grogu from turning to the dark side just in this season, like we've seen so many other sons turn to the dark side or be tempted in Star Wars. So I think, yeah, he's just like, he started as this emotionless bounty hunter, and now he's like this nurturing caretaker, and he's still remaining like a badass warrior through it all. So there's not like, it's not an either or situation. It's like we should be caring and we should also be warriors and strong, and we can have masculine and feminine traits, and we don't have to put anyone in a box, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting, the point that you made, Kayla, about, you know, it was like Ahsoka that really, really was the turning point, like the watershed moment for Din here, and realizing that like he is a father to Grogu, in the sense that, you know, she realized that they both had a connection with each other, affection for each other, and she's seen how that could ruin somebody, turn them to the dark side. So yeah, it's cool to see that come from her, and I think that's a really important thing that you were talking about how, you know, you could be like this badass bounty hunter, but still have those, you know, emotions and those feminine traits. that you lean into, and I think Dinjarin is a really great example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the the inverse too of like showing the strength of having qualities like both masculine and feminine as well. And I think the fact that Ahsoka was the triggering point for that. I know, Kayla, I've talked to you about Ahsoka as sort of like filling in that role of like not necessarily leaning one way or the other in typical like gender norms, but really going in on like owning both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking a lot about this. Like, why was it Ahsoka that made him like realize? Like, at first I was like, oh, is it because, she's like, she's a woman and she's like compassionate and is she motherly? Or is she's not motherly at all and she's just seen this before. She's like experienced and strong and she's kind of like slapping Mando in the face a little bit. So I think that could be like a whole other topic to go on. But I think it's interesting to examine like why it was Ahsoka that changed his mind and made him realize like his more feminine attributes.
Yeah, it's almost like she was sort of taken aback by the fact that like he wasn't that connected to her, to Grogu in a sense, right? Like she was kind of like, like what's going on here? Like you got to be like fatherly to him. Yeah, it's interesting.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
She really whipped it into shape.
She did.
I know we've covered a lot of ground, but do you have any other major points, Kayla, that we didn't touch on about the main idea of Mando breaking down barriers?
I think we covered it all pretty well, and just how he's continuously blurring the lines between masculinity and femininity. And I think it's very important, like in Star Wars, to consider that and see how it reflects us in our own society. Because just with Star Wars fans and with the way the movies have been, it's like really, really refreshing to have this focus on this like strong warrior who's taken over this father role.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, I feel like these themes aren't really explored that much in mainstream media, so it's cool to see Mandalorian with such the reach that it has talk about these issues and stuff.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like in season 1 of Mandalorian, there was a lot of criticism of how not a lot of women were in it, and if they were, they didn't get speaking roles. So I think this season did fix that issue for the most part. And important to keep talking about this because yeah, like why don't we talk about feminism in Star Wars? There's a reason for that too. So it's really important to keep having conversations like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What a better character to explore those things than a Mandalorian bounty hunter, right?
Yeah. See, that's what I think is the fun part too, because like I think I did this was like one of my final assignments for college. I did a video essay about Mad Max Fury Road, which is also a very, very like pro-feminism action movie type deal about this badass bounty hunter, Mad Max, right? But it's not about him. And I think it's very fun when the crowd that listens to Star Wars or likes Star Wars, enjoys movies like this, is like, don't make it political. What are you talking about? And stuff like that. Like, it's so funny to me because specifically I thought Mad Max, where you market like literally the dude's name is in the movie and it's Tom Hardy first billing, but it's Furiosa's movie, you know? It's about her. So I think it's fun when the creatives behind projects use the front that just makes a lot of people that are bigots look foolish when they don't get the point.
Yeah, and then another movie I thought of is when we saw Birds of Prey.
Sure.
That was like such a great like feminist movie because it didn't scream at you, but there were just like little tidbits in there that really communicated like the viewpoint of a woman in like such a badass role. So yeah, that was cool.
All these examples too, definitely from like, marketing or whatever doesn't scream that, but it's interesting that like, and good that, we have mainstream art that's sort of subverting viewers' expectations and talking about these things.
Sure. Well, I thought that was a great podcast episode.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. as we wrap up, Kayla, is there anything you want to shout out and plug? I know you do some Star Wars content here and there.
Yeah, you can follow me on TikTok. I think I'm just at Kayla Karloff. That is KALAHKARLOFF. On Twitter, I'm at Kayla KK. Yeah, Facebook, I'm also at Kayla Karloff. I have some music you can listen to, some TikToks you can watch, some short films you can consume that Christian is also in.
Yeah.
So those are my plugs. What my main Star Wars content comes from TikTok.
Nice.
And also Swift if you
Mike, what about you?
So I'm not on TikTok. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike P. Connors. But definitely follow Kayla on TikTok and Christian, because Christian's got some good TikToks, good Star Wars TikToks too. I know.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you can follow me everywhere at ShuntTV2. That's a new at. We're leading into the Star Wars stuff. This show, though, this is a bonus episode of Jedi Knights. Like I said, the Star Wars podcast for JoyClicks. The video version of this show is available at youtube.com/JoyClicks. Episodes every Tuesday night. This episode is an exception to that. Like I said, it's a bonus one. But new episodes every Tuesday night. Also available on podcast services like Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you listen to it in audio format, it'd be greatly appreciated if you gave the show a review or a star rating. Takes a second, helps us out a lot. We also have Patreon, patreon.com/joyclicks if you want to get involved. The $1 and $5 tiers will get you little bonuses, and $5 gets you producer credit on all of our podcasts, including this one. And I think that wraps it up. So, as we sign off, should we just all do it? This is the way.
Well, I want to thank Kayla for coming on. That was really great.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for having me. I watch you guys and I listen to you guys so much, and like I said, I'm Mike's biggest fan. For so long, it's finally great to be on with you guys, because I know Christian and I have many conversations about Star Wars, and I'm always begging for him to put me in the spotlight.
Yes. Well, thank you again. Do you have a quote you want to sign off with, Kayla?
Me?
Yeah, because me and Mike have ours locked down. But do you have one in mind?
Sure.
Okay.
I have one.
All
Does
right.
it have to be Star Wars?
I mean, if you'd want it to be, but sure, go with whatever your heart tells you. Okay. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, we're fine. Everything's fine. How are you?
May the Force be with you.
People with kindness.
Oh, yes, you're right. Beep is up.